Hey, and welcome to the Reset Podcast. Everything you need to know that your therapist probably never told you. Researched by experts, real life experiences. This is Reset. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Reset Podcast. We're so glad that you're here with us today. Today, we're going to dive into grief and what it means to grieve and what it means to process when you lose, whether that's somebody in your life to death, or you lose a job, or you lose a friendship, or you just lose an opportunity. What does grief look like, and how do we do it? And specifically because I just lost my dad about a month ago, and Joe actually lost his mom 3 years ago. So we are not strangers to the grief department. And I think especially being in the industry that we are with mental health, we're very aware that it's something extremely important in the healing process. And I got to tell y'all, one of the biggest things that I have been experiencing this last month is I keep asking myself, how do I grieve healthily? How do I grieve well? How do I do this well? I want to make sure that I'm being a good model to my kids. I want to make sure that I'm also being a good role model to myself, like that I'm actually doing this well. And you want to know something funny? The idea of grieving is healthy. So there is no equation to how you do it, but grief is a choice. So many people lose something and they never even take the time to grieve. They push it aside subconsciously or unconsciously, and they don't allow themselves to feel all the feelings. So grief itself is actually the healthy response to loss. And so I've had to tell myself to stop thinking, what does it look like to be grieving healthily? Because really, the idea of grieving, period, is healthy.
Well, it's interesting to think that everyone has losses in life, but not everyone grieves the losses.
Correct.
And there's an aspect in which people have losses and they just never want to stare at it, feel it, and deal with it. Instead, they may suppress it or repress it in life. And when it's happening, they keep on going in life, thinking everything is fine. But the reality of it, a few things happen. I think number one is the aspect if you have, so especially because of a major loss, like say the death of a loved one, that you could be stuck in that developmental age in which you lost them. Say you lost someone at age 12, never grieved that. There's so much of you that's still stuck as that 12-year-old, how you respond, act in life, relationships, things like that. I think the second thing we don't deal with grief appropriately, I think what happens is it comes off, I think a lot of people just get a lot of bitterness in life, and they get bitter. And so they have a short fuse, anger issues, they self-sabotage relationships, they have a hard time dealing with other hard emotions, because I believe when you have something you need to deal with like grief and something else comes in that's lesser than grief, you just can't handle that either.
Right.
Because what's important, which is grieving that situation, person, and it can even be like a moment, like trauma, tragedy, that if you don't deal with that, then what happens is that it's hard for you to deal with anything else or shoulder anything else, because unresolved grief will lead into depression. Because there's a difference between depression and grief. And grief is the aspect of you working something out, which we'll get to. But when you have unresolved grief, that is when depression occurs. When you have unresolved grief, that's when bitterness occurs. When you have unresolved grief, that is when the unhealthy version of you will continue to be conditioned by that.
Right. Because we've said this before too. If you don't I want to say it wrong. I want to say if you don't let it out, you act it out. So if you don't experience the feelings, if you don't process the feelings, you're going to act it out in an unhealthy way potentially. You know, it's going to come out, like you said, in other areas of your life, and it's going to really start affecting other people. So the process of grieving is not just for yourself, it's actually for other people as well.
Well, you can't hide loss. I think that's what you're trying to say. You just can't hide. You can't hide it in your life because it will come out in different dynamics where it may be. Obviously, the big losses make sense. Losing actual death, like losing someone, like you said, like your dad, my mom, like maybe it's a husband or if it's a child.
Yeah. Like
those are the big ones, or a friend, where it may be. But then we realize there's also all these, I would consider like micro losses, like the time when USC lost to Texas in the national championship. That is something I had to grieve tremendously to this day. And so But those are like, there's micro losses in our lives. Like the expectations not being met is a loss. The fact is I was thinking about during COVID, like a lot of people didn't have their graduations. That's a loss. Some people had to delay their marriage or wedding. That's a loss. The fact is that maybe, you know, your children makes a wrong decision. That's when you got to grieve. And so we have these micro losses that happens through the day that I think we do micro grieving. And some of us could do micro grieving really well. But when the big ones come in, we have to unpack that. And it comes in where it's like a storm that's going to be here for months to years. Like, you know, how do we really weather that appropriately and correctly?
There's no timeline, which I've realized, like I was saying before, there's no equation, there's no timeline. I think a lot of people are like, okay, let me just grieve so I can move on, let's go. But grieving also isn't necessarily getting over something, it's getting through something. Because you're never going to get over the loss of somebody. Like, you shouldn't. Like, it's okay to be like, that is something that will impact me for the rest of my life. But because I took the time to grieve, I got through it. And I can look back at that time now, and I can move forward with my life and get through that pain instead of getting stuck because we don't grieve those losses. And it's just a dangerous place to be in.
Well, I think the door of grief never shuts. And it's definitely never locked.
Yeah.
Right? In so many ways. So meaning that it could happen any time in any moment. And after maybe the original true work of grieving that you do in the beginning, if you choose to, like you said, because grieving is a choice. After that, it could happen any time. It could be a certain sound, a certain song, you know, a certain smell, a certain, you know, place, where it may be, where it can open up that door again of grieving. And that's when you look at it and say, yes, I will embrace this loss again out of respect of the loss or even the person, for example. I'm going to enter myself into grief.
Yeah.
But it only might be for a minute or for a moment.
Yeah.
Maybe it's for a week. I always believed, I remember being taught, the proper grief, there's an aspect of like what we call like living legacy. That if you grieve correctly someone, there's a living legacy aspect to that, which means that's an active grief. I'm going to continue to bring this person. I don't bury them in the ground per se, that I carry them with us. So for example, you know, like we talked about, my mom passed away a few years ago. We still do her famous Taco Tuesdays every Tuesday. Every time that date comes up, we talk about it with the kids. Moments or characteristics of our kids that we see from grandma, we point them out. That's a grandma moment. We talk about grandma luck, right? Like that is us saying we're going to continue to carry on that person like a living legacy. And it's just continual. I think it's hard for people is when they don't see it as continual and they see it as absolute at the start and stop. Then they get hard on themselves. I think a lot of men do this. They become very, you know, self-deprecating in terms of why is this still affecting me? Why is this still happening to me? And the answer to that is it's always going to be there in some way. And our relationship to it will be healthier. Our relationship to it or our response to it will get better as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I think a lot of people feel fearful to grieve because, at least what I've experienced in just friendships or just seeing other people grieve, or maybe they haven't grieved something from the past a long time ago, is they really think they're never going to get over. They think it's actually going to bring them deeper into the depths of despair. Do you see that as a therapist? Like people are so scared to unlock maybe something they've never grieved because they're like, what if I never get over it? But rarely does that happen because you've worked through it. Then you actually come out on the other side healthier. But there's this fear I think people feel, and so that's why they kind of shove it away or ignore it or just say, oh, I'm fine, I'm good, I cried a little bit, I'm great.
I think I see that more with parents who lose a child or even with a child who loses a parent. I think those relationships are really next level grieving, I would say. And sometimes people don't want to jump into that just because they feel like it's just going to be too hard. Like I can't handle it. It's going to break me.
Right. Yes.
Not knowing that weathering that part of it, just really jumping into those memories, it's going to create tears. Where there's tears, there's healing. Where there's weeping, there's healing. And sometimes we have to look at it as, I owe it to this person to go in and think about these beautiful moments and memories we did have. And this will allow me to then start that living legacy that I want to have in them, because in those moments and memories, there's some of those I could continue as remembering and reminder of who that person was in my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of times we got to look at grief as like an onion. I know some like psychologists talk about this, where there's so many layers to it. For me, I feel like there's really 3 layers to grieving in so many ways. I think for a lot of us is grieving the past, right? All those moments and memories that we talked about, including, I would put in that category the aspect of just maybe regrets, and they wish I didn't, could have said, would have done, that kind of stuff. And then there's the second layer, the concept in which we grieve the present of the loss, meaning I miss their presence, I miss opportunities to talk to them, where that present, feeling is. But then there's the third part, which is grieving the future. Grieving the fact is they won't be at my wedding. Grieving the fact is they're not going to be there for this first thing with fill in the blank. Grieving the fact is they're not going to be there when we do this, and we wish they were there. I mean, that is a lot when you think about loss, is the past, the present, and the future. And that can happen all at once. It can happen sporadically in different times with different layers. But I really think that's the core of that onion.
Well, it's like today, I'm sorry, I laughed a little because our sweet daughter has an ear infection, and I brought her to urgent care. And today actually marks the exact month my dad passed. And so it really hit me hard this morning, writing the date in my journal, like, oh my gosh, feels like it's been years, but then it feels like it was yesterday. And I get up there, and I'm thinking on the way there, gosh, how many times have we brought our kids to the doctor and it's nothing, and we have to pay this copay, and we have a weird insurance because we pay out of pocket theoretically, but we do have insurance. It's like this weird thing we do. And I'm just like angry in my mind bringing her to the doctor. And I get up to the front desk, and I'm small talking with the girl, and we're just talking about a bunch of different things. And she looks at me and she says, this is actually Patient Appreciation Month. And I want to let you know that I've chosen you today, that we're going to cover your entire visit for today. And I got teary-eyed. I probably normally would. I'm an emotional human being. That's just how I respond. But because I'm in this place of grief, she may have thought I was crazy. I mean, I'm pregnant too, so I could blame it on that. But I had tears just streaming down my face. And I think in a way she probably thought, oh, I picked the right person to bless today. But it came out in a way where I just felt like, wow, I felt seen. And even though she didn't even know I needed this little kind of gift, but so it unlocked just the tear meter. And since grief is just so forefront right now in my emotional being right now, I just lost it.
I think this is a great example where kindness can break the barrier to allow us to embrace grief that's just been stacking up.
Yeah. And she had no idea.
No, it's also the concept in which it's like when people brought you meals, or different things came in the mail, that those acts of kindness, once again, will break that slight barrier of the present to then start embracing the grief that's stacking up. And it's interesting where kindness allows us in so many ways to give permission, like the acts of kindness of others during a time of loss allows us to say, it's okay for me to weep. It's okay for me to cry. Now, where I go to in that moment is, I hope she would get a surgery done and pay for that. Like if what happens if she needed surgery, our daughter? Would they have paid for it then? Oh, at that point, put everything on the tab.
Everything. You think so differently. Oh, well, that's funny.
This is the part of the show where we talk about things from the past.
Like the 1900s?
Life was so much simpler back in my day.
Like no cell phones or Netflix?
Our phones were attached to a wall. Mickey Mouse Club, Saved by the Bell, TGIF. Friends Seinfeld, Mr. Rogers, Care Bears, G.I. Joe. Shrinky Dinks, Cabbage Patch, Lincoln Log, Strawberry
I have no idea what you're talking about, lady.
So we officially introduce our children to our, how can I put it, our friends back in the day that we grew up with, AC and Zach Morse, and Saved by the Bell. And the best part about it was when we're watching the show, our son says, "Dad, what's that?" And I said, what's what? He goes, what's that? And he goes to the screen and points at it. I go, oh, that's a home phone. And he's like, what? And it dawned on me, our kids have never seen a home phone with a cord. They've never lived the life of the home phone. And this just reminds me of, once again, things I feel like that need to come back from the 1900s is the home phone. Because the home phone taught us this at a very young age. First of all, every family had the age in which you were not allowed to answer the phone until you get to that certain age. In that age, when you get to there, is your parents taught you how to answer the phone. For example, hello, Jardine residence, Joey speaking. How may I help you? Something like that, right?
Danielson residence. May I ask who's calling?
Exactly. And we were taught greetings, and we were told how to present ourselves, which actually helped out in social life later on, right? We also were, learned when someone's, is your mom there? No, she's not present right now. She's not here right now. Can I please take a message? And then next to your phone, if your parents were wise, they had the pen, paper, and the memo, and you took notes, and you left it there. So it taught you how to communicate, take notes, give mom and dad, well,
it also taught you how to greet somebody else. Like when I would call a friend, I remember my parents teaching me this is how you call a friend. Like ring, 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 ring. Hi, this is Kristen. Is Whitney there?
Yes.
I was never allowed to just say, hey, is Whitney there? Like I'd have to be like, is Audrey there?
Yep.
Like this is Kristen. And so then they didn't have to say, may I ask who's calling? Because I do remember my parents saying, okay, if someone asks for us, the next question needs to be, if you didn't already say it in the beginning, may I ask who's calling?
Yes, 100%. And also the aspect, think about this. We had to be careful about what we talked about because there's always that great chance that you had another parent listening to the other line on purpose, a brother or sister listening. And so it forced you to really watch what you said out of fear that someone else is going to hear it on the other line accidentally or purposefully, which we don't get that with cell phones with kids because they where they want, how they want it, right? I also think the aspect of it, I remember, maybe I'm a little older than you, but I remember my parents were like, you cannot make phone calls until after 7 o'clock because it goes from 7 cents a minute to 3 cents a minute. Remember, it was per minute you get charged?
I don't remember that.
I do. I remember my parents sitting down saying, who made this phone call before 7 o'clock when the bill came in? But here's the key. Here's what it taught us. Ready for it? It at least taught me. It taught me is that because we were getting charged per minute is you really make sure that your words mattered. Mm-hmm. And it made you make sure that this conversation, majority of the time, was very fruitful.
Had a purpose.
Because if not, I'm out. But let me tell you what the purpose really was, majority of the time. When can we get together? It was always this concept, okay, hey, when can you do this? Can you do that? When we're going to talk, we're going to see each other tomorrow, whatever it may be. There was just great purpose in those conversations. While now I feel like our kids are going to be growing up with their cell phones. And it's an open diary. It's just, they're just going to have.
They're always together. Like, they're not really asking when can we be together because they feel like they're together.
That's a good point.
Because they're just talking back and forth.
That's a good point in which after school was done, let's say high school, junior high, we had 12 hours of just social break, social relaxation. Like we could go home, not hear from anyone. We could process it. You're right. Now the kiddos have it where they in school, they're still continuing their social batteries are still going and there's no break in between until they fall asleep on a FaceTime call, which I don't know why my clients do this. They fall asleep on a FaceTime call, which makes no sense. And
First of all, no phones in the bedroom.
That is true.
Phones in the bedroom.
The bedroom is a place to sleep, not to entertain, as I say. And so I just think there's so much etiquette that we got from the home phone that we need to bring back.
Well, and I remember my mom we were just talking about phones, but maybe because it got brought up, and she was talking about how it was a party line. You do like party lines way back.
The guy that had the party line, legendary.
Yes, and you shared the same line. So like mom said, like she'd pick up the phone to call her cousin, and it was being used already by somebody else, and you could literally though listen in on conversations if you want.
I totally misread what you're talking about. You're talking about old school.
I'm talking about old school.
I'm talking about
you purposely
in the
made
90s.
one?
Someone had a party line where or they can call someone else, click it once, call someone else, click it, and
I
not
remember
tell them.
that.
Yes, and that is when you would call and you'd be silent and say, "Hey,
It's like Mean Girls.
Yeah,
Do you remember that?
Yes, exactly what was happening, and I kind of miss those days. We're kind of fun.
Yeah, so you'd be silently on the other line. Yeah, no, this is like because there wasn't a lot of phone, it was just technology was new. So they shared the lines. I mean, can you imagine you're having this like personal conversation and some like 10-year-old just picks up the phone trying to call their cousin?
That's the point. No one did. They wait till they're in person to do it.
You're
That's
right.
what I was trying
So
to get to.
You're right.
So then you had
actually.
that full-on empathy of seeing the person. I remember two big moments in our lives growing up with this phone. The first one was when my parents finally got like the 50-foot cord that we could take it from the kitchen all the way to the other room, and we just talk silently to finally have.
I would go into the pantry.
Yes. The second one, that's the like Punky Brewster review. The second one is when we got that first cordless phone.
That was crazy.
Which was sometimes you could hear your neighbor talking, probably caused cancer. And do you remember, like, that was then legend. Now we got private conversations in the other room.
But you had to put it back on the charger when you were done talking. Do you remember that?
I remember
because if you would like,
if
left
not, you're
it somewhere-
grounded. That's right. Parents
if you
would be
left
so
it somewhere,
mad.
It would just lose its charge, and because back then it was like the charger under the wall, and so you had to like put it back in the charger. Oh, I'm getting all these memories. Yeah.
See, this is stuff our kids will never know.
They'll never know. But I'm sure our parents thought the same thing, right? About things they
had cell phones.
Technology.
I mean, they had home phones.
It was still different. We actually got introduced to the cordless phone world.
That's right. The cordless was next level. Then the crazy part, you have that one friend that had their own phone number for their room.
Oh, yes. What was? Oh.
That was like back in the 90s, 1900s. That's considered to be poor parenting.
Their own in their room had their own phone and phone line. You're right, and answering machine.
It was the kid. It was always the kid that smoked pot in high school. You know what I'm trying to say. We all know that parent that's like, get your own phone number. Come on now.
Remember that phone that was clear and you could see all the parts inside?
VTech.
I wanted it so bad.
I know.
But I wasn't allowed to have a phone in my room.
Here's the other part that's great about the home phone was you're now with your buddies and you can now do prank calls.
Oh, yeah.
Without any fear.
We did. Oh, my gosh. We used to do that.
I used to have this prank call alter ego called Little Bow Wow, just like the artist. And I would call up people and say, this is Little Bow Wow. No joke. Little Bow Wow, legendary back in the day.
You now realize you outed yourself out to all of our friends who are probably going to call you Little Bow Wow now.
No, my friends were there. It's just
I'm
the
saying,
random
like,
people.
new friends.
Yeah, that random person I did Little Bow Wow to, they're probably finally he's revealed.
He's revealed. That Little Bow Wow was harassing me for years in the 90s.
You let the dog out. Yeah.
Let us know if you miss having a home phone / should we get a home phone for our kids to at least have a line somewhere? I don't know.
That's a good point. That's when our last house, since it's a new build, they asked us, do you want the hookup for a home phone? And I said, don't all houses come with the opportunity for a home phone? And the guy said, majority of people say no. The answer is no.
Crazy.
So we paid the extra, whatever, $60, $80 to have the hookup for the home phone. We don't have one because...
But the hookups are there.
Right.
The security. The what if, knowing we could obtain a home
Do you know
phone.
what came with the home phone? The voicemail. And we just watched that Friends episode of The Voicemail.
Oh, yeah. So
where the voicemail, we came home and there's that light and you press it and you pray. It's like, is it my girlfriend calling? Like, it's unknown when it came to it. Yeah. The worst is when you accidentally delete it.
Yep.
The best, too, is when you came back from vacation, you have like 20 messages. Remember that?
You have to, again, with the pad of paper, remember having to like...
100%.
And it only happened to me twice in school where I like tried to race home before parents got home so the school message wasn't heard. Did that ever happen to you?
I remember when my sister, I'm not going to name which one, but wild child, would ditch school and then the school called. You have your daughter, miss, and it would be like first, second, third, fourth period. And I'm like, oh, you're so screwed. Hang up the phone, tell the parents the news. Loved it. But the best is when you got that call and it's for you, and you're just like, nope, we're good.
And delete. I think
Done.
I only ditched like genuinely like twice in high school. I was a good kid, but I remember like freaking out. And I want them to know. Sorry if you're listening to this, Mom.
And
Love
the crazy
you.
part, and this will be my last thing about this segment, the best part about home phone world was we all had to memorize 1,000 phone numbers.
Yes, I still have them memorized to this day.
All my friends, I still remember.
In high school,
We
elementary
will
school.
always remember our home phone number, by the way.
Yes.
Actually, I was pretty sad. 4 years ago, my dad finally got rid of the home. That phone number was the Jardine phone number for almost 40 years.
That's sad.
I wanted it.
But how were you gonna get a home? Like it
I
was
would have him
impossible.
transfer it to me.
Oh my gosh. No, but you're right. And just memorizing phone numbers in general. Just absolutely. Yep.
Dude, I'm like a 10-year-old I remember memorizing all these phone numbers. It's crazy.
Oh, kids, you have it so easy. You just push the person's name and you call them.
That's it.
And now, back to the show.
Also, along the idea of kindness, you just made me think about how you cannot isolate yourself when you're grieving, and that fellowship is an absolute necessary part of grieving. And fellowship is what we need in times of sorrow, because it's just been proven that when we carry each other's burdens, how much lighter it feels. Like you were saying, getting just a card in the mail. No, you don't even have to spend money. You don't have to necessarily send flowers or a gift or whatever it is and you're far away. Just getting a card from somebody that I hadn't heard from in a long time, just a handwritten note, was so emotional. And of course, getting gifts or getting those meals dropped off, or friends saying, tell us exactly what you need if you can figure it out right now. If not, we're just going to try to guess and bless you, you know. Just the amount of community and people that gathered around us, family members that, you know, did show up in person, to our friends and our neighborhood. It was just the most beautiful feeling of realizing, wow, I couldn't have done this alone. It would have felt so lonely. And there's this beauty to community and fellowship and not isolating yourself when you are feeling grief and really feeling lonely. And no matter what we're going through, like, you don't have to feel like you need to relate to it. Just show up and love on someone. And you said those little acts of kindness, because it can be awkward too. Showing up for someone in grief can be hard. Like, what do I say? What do I do? And I think now that we're getting older in our lives, we're experiencing more grief. And so we've had people role model to us what to do.
Well, I think it's a good example that the community, our community, did so well, was they eliminated a lot of the questions of what can we do for you, and they just did it. In a matter of 24 hours, there was the meal train. We didn't ask for it, someone just did it. Then someone instantly went, you know, oddly enough, our amazing realtors contacted us and said, we're going to host a memorial at their beautiful, amazing property for your dad. They just said, we're doing this. Then people started flying in, didn't ask us, started flying in to wrap around you and your mom and us. Then we had people just showing up, just wanting to be near us or be near you and being present, you know, with your mom. That people just doing, which is beautiful, without asking, I think is a good reminder that when we have people in our lives who are struggling with grief or with loss, it's just go, just do it, just Nike it. You know?
Just because I love that. Just do it. Because I think a lot of times you don't know what you need when you're grieving. And I think, and I'm not saying, I hope this does not offend anybody, because I've said it too before, but I've learned that I'm just going to do and not ask. It's the whole, if there's anything I can do, let me know. That is the hardest thing, to reach out to somebody when you're grieving. Like, it really is. And a lot of times you don't know what you need. And so, yes, say that. Go ahead and say that. But also show up, like you were saying. Just bring the meal. Like, I had a friend be like, okay, I'm going to do a play date with your kids this week. What day works best, Monday or Wednesday? I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Thank you. Just show up. Don't say, can I do this? It's like, no, I'm going to do this. What works better for you? Or if you are really close to somebody, try as hard as you can, if you are the one grieving, to think of something specific. I think one time one of our friends asked, and I said, we really would love paper plates. because we don't want to do dishes. It's silly, but I thought of it and I said it. It's also hard to say this is what I need, But I think for sure what I learned in this season is a lot of times you don't know what you need. And like you said, just show up, just do it. But also say the words. It's okay to say those words. I just think a lot of times people won't necessarily say what they need because you're just lost in grief.
You're not in a need statement time. You're in a moment of paralyzation. And so that's why you need people just to help you and do what's right, even though you don't know what's right or wrong, in those moments. And so I think it's also a good reminder, and I hear this a lot from my clients who go through major grief, is after the ceremony or the funeral, the memorial, they feel like people just forget. People don't check in. People don't contact them. People don't want to talk about the person who passed away with them. And
They're almost afraid.
Right. It's not insensitive. People want to talk about people they lost. People want to have the opportunity to talk about stories. People want to hear the stories that they had with that person that you lost. And to remind ourselves that sometimes the greatest feeling of loneliness, of loss, occurs months to even a year afterwards plus after we lost that person. And we got to remember that those people still need to be checked in on. With grieving, especially just grieving even a parent, right? When it comes to loss, is so much of it, you start in many ways thinking about your own life and thinking about how you want to live it. So then at the end, you feel, or you want other people to feel, you lived it well. And so it's odd enough about weird part, at least for me, that came from loss was a sense of personal accountability.
Like a reflection.
Right. A personal accountability of things that probably I need to start doing I never did, or the aspect of even like my own personal physical health, or it has to do with my aspect of just relational health, that you get a sense of like existentialism, right? You get a sense of, okay, I got to start doing the things I know I need to do. And there's no better way to do that than now that I lost this person. In this case, this is actually a great strategy and tool, which is sometimes you should channel grief and channel loss. And channeling it at times is a great way to grieve, right? It's an opportunity for you to turn something that's hurtful and hard and difficult and something that could possibly be beautiful or change of life for you. And I see that a lot with people. They do that.
Grieving is a process. And I don't think there's an equation or even like a how-to. I think it's just like you were saying, grieving is being aware of how you're feeling the feels when you feel them. And sometimes you need to phone a friend. Sometimes you need to journal it. Sometimes you just need to sit with your thoughts and cry. And I think I'm at a point right now realizing, okay, I want to implement some of my healthy routine and habits back, because you also don't want to go to a dark place. Like you were saying, there's a difference between grieving and depression. And so I think it's important to listen to our bodies and minds and stay in bed sometimes when we need to. But, maybe 3 days in bed, it's when you're like, okay, I need to get out of this. I need to realize I don't want to stay stuck again, that point of grief.
Thank you so much for being here and listening to the Reset Podcast. We're so glad that you joined us. If you enjoyed this episode, we want to hear from you. Can you leave us a review, a rating, or maybe even hit that subscribe button, or share it with a friend that needs to hear it? We work with individuals, athletes, couples, and teams to overcome mental barriers that are holding them back from reaching their maximum potential. If that sounds like you, learn more about what we do at theresetgroup.com. We would love to connect with you on social media, so be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok at The Reset Group. See you next time.